Good morning. I wasn't sure if it was on yet because our clock hadn't started yet, but thanks for coming out. We have a chock-full show. We're gonna go through with Ariel's gonna cover, some of the Windows Modern Management specifics. We have Joseph Parody from Avanade is gonna come on and give the customer story. We have Rob that's gonna come out. Rob York's gonna come out, and he's got a set of turntables up here. He's gonna do, he's gonna lay out some demos. And then I'm going to come back and talk really about to kind of build on some of the announcements yesterday that Brad made around the co-management track. So we're just going to give you the whole arc of the Windows 10 journey to modernizing Windows 10, and we've got a lot to get through. So I'm just going to jump into the agenda, and then I'm going to hand over to Ariel. So first and foremost, it's really just about understanding. I know you've probably had your fill of Microsoft 365 already, but we're going to talk just a little bit more about that. And I think what I'm super excited about, I haven't used that term in a conference in a long time, is having Joseph come out and talk about the Avanade perspective. And I think that'll be super interesting for everyone to hear as the voice of the customer, to talk about the challenges that they've found for modernizing Windows and how we're working together with them and with their feedback to improve improve the way that customers can make that journey. And then I'll come in for the last part and really talk about the work that we're doing to build this out. I do want to call out a couple of other sessions here because of the title of this presentation. There are really three of these, and they build on each other. Consider this an overview. In this particular session, we don't go too deep into the Office piece of Microsoft 365. The 3075 session there after this one that Heidi on my team is doing will give more details on the Office piece. So if you're interested in Office, definitely go to Heidi's session after this one at 10:45. And then on Thursday, there's a deeper dive on the Windows side of the story. So think of this as an overview, a separate session of focus on Office, a separate focus on Windows and EMS. So with that, I will hand over to Ariel. There you go.
Okay, thank you, Jason. Can you hear me? How's the audio? Over here, it sounds echoing. I'm hearing myself. So the folks with the audio, if you can do anything about this, that would be awesome, because I can hardly hear myself. Actually, I hear myself a few times. All right, good morning, everyone. So you feel as good as I am this morning. Good morning, everyone. All right, so my name is Ariel Netz. I'm a group program manager within the Windows division. Me and my team, primary focus is around you, our commercial customers. That is the enterprise and small and medium businesses. Today, what I would like to cover with you is the vision that we have for modern management for Windows, and actually share with you some of our thinking that went through it, because I believe that actually understanding our thinking would help you understand where we're heading, not just now, but somewhere in the future as well. So that would be our main focus. You've probably seen this slide. This is probably the most popular slide at Ignite. This one, and probably field evaluations at the end. This is something that Kirk covered yesterday. And how many of you actually saw Kirk's presentation? Right. So if you really want to learn about everything about Microsoft 365, you should actually watch his presentation. It's a very good presentation that gives a great overview about everything that is unique about Microsoft 365. But in a very short version of this, Microsoft 365 represents the best of Office, Windows, and EMS. Okay? The most important thing, from my perspective, if you look at this title, a complete, intelligent, secure solution to empower employees, the two most important words in my mind in this context of modern IT is actually empower employees. Kirk yesterday hosted a panel from, I believe it was GE. And over there, they were discussing how much they are actually relying on their IT department to help them increase their employees' productivity. They were talking about how much it's important for them to try to squeeze another 1 or 5% of productivity and the impact that it would have on the bottom line. This is actually, when you think about what is modern IT versus traditional IT, this is one of the biggest changes that I think that we've seen in recent years. It used to be that IT was the department of no. That was the department that actually told their employees what they cannot do. They told them exactly which device they can buy. They told them exactly which application they can install. It was basically just trying to restrict users' experiences. They haven't been doing this for bad reasons. It was all about security and making sure that it's within budget. But we see more and more departments of IT changing their role rather than being the safeguard of the enterprise. They're becoming the source of innovation. This is the team that is now being looked at to introduce new technologies that would empower employees. And I think that represents a big shift that we haven't seen in many years. To make this happen, obviously we need to make the employees productive. We need a productive platform, and that is the Microsoft 365 platform that is based on Windows. Of course, it has Office and EMS. Both of those are available on other platforms, but for us to provide the best experiences that we can offer, it is going to be based on the combination of those three components on top of Windows. That platform has four main attributes, four pillars. It is a platform that needs to be easy to deploy and manage, always up to date, super important. If you've seen Brad's presentation yesterday, we talked about this extensively. It is a platform that provides a lot of telemetry, a lot of insights for you and us to be more productive and tune the system for the needs of our users. And then obviously it needs to be a very secure platform. So this is the slide that I think Brad showed. And kind of this is the nice packaged marketing slides. I'm going to show you some of the less fancy slides, how we got there, because I think that understanding the journey that we went through over the past few years, getting to the point that we can actually define that as being the pillars is important. So let me explain how we went through this. First, we started this reimagination, trying to rethink about the PC in the world of mobile devices. We tried to define ourselves as sets of pillars, design pillars, that we would always go to and rethink about our feature sets and use those to apply for Windows. So I'm going to go with you. This is the original slide that we actually presented with some insiders about a year ago. It is a trimmed down version of this because we don't have so much time, but I would like to cover some of those because they are really important. The first one, which is the basic of everything, is try to think about PCs as modern devices. I could easily put here, instead of modern devices, I should have said maybe mobile devices or phones or tablets. But if I said that PC equals to those, it would start causing a lot of confusion and a lot of rumors and speculation about what we really mean. In reality, this is about try to think why a PC cannot behave like your phone that you just bought in the phone in the store, and you provision it by just entering your username and password. Why is a PC so different? Why is people still doing imaging? Why, when we're resetting those devices, it's not like resetting your phone, right? And so on and on. So every time that we are facing a challenge and trying to think of our design, we're going back and saying, how would your phone behave? How would your tablet behave? And we're trying to apply this to Windows. It's an important point because I actually, as we're having this more and more conversation with customers, we're hearing our customers asking the same sets of questions, but not out of us. They're asking themselves those questions. Because today, we're seeing more and more mixed environment. Employees bring their own devices. They're bringing their own Macs. They're bringing their own Android devices. They're bringing maybe Chromebooks. And they're starting to ask themselves, why are we not treating the PCs like we're treating those devices, or vice versa? It's a fair question. Are we applying the same policies that we used to apply for the past 20 years just because that's what we're used to with a PC? Where on the other devices, we don't? It is a question that I think is worth thinking about because, again, you think about the experiences that you want to provide your users. Should it be lockdown devices like a PC typically is, or should it be, bring your own device experiences? So that's one trend that we thought about and we're seeing more customers thinking about. The other thing that we wanted to do is make sure that the future solution that we are building scales to every size of org, right? Microsoft has done a brilliant job in the past years taking care of the enterprise, right? We built solutions that's specific for them. We priced this especially for them. We sold them only to the enterprise, and we left behind all the small, medium businesses. The cloud is bringing us the opportunity to actually offer the same solutions to all customers. Of course, we need to actually build the solution in a way that would fit both SMBs as well as enterprises, and that is a design point that we would always have to go to and rethink in our designs how we're building a solution. The other thing that we need to keep in mind, that the days of long releases of 2, 3, maybe sometimes 5 years of building Windows are long gone. Like modern devices, there are going to be a continuous updates. They're going to roll out every few months. In Windows case, it's about twice a year. And obviously, from an engineering perspective, it's a big challenge. It's a big change the way we think, the way that we design, the way that we are planning. But that's one aspect. The other aspect for us is to understand what is the implication for you as the customers to actually take those updates twice a year. We understand that it's hard, and we need to make sure that we're building it correctly and we're providing you the right tools to make sure that you can stay up to date. The other one is secured. This actually goes as an obvious, but it is always a good reminder. Those devices needs to be always secure. So obviously we're adding a lot of security capabilities into the system by itself, but that's one aspect. The other aspect is we would never introduce a feature into Windows that we believe that is going to compromise the security of those devices. There are many features. There are many things that we can actually do to simplify user experiences, but they are actually coming on the expense of security. Those are not going to happen. This is the most critical thing that we can actually do. The other thing to keep in mind is the age of telemetry, big data. A lot of data is coming from those devices. We as an engineering team using this data to actually improve the experiences on Windows. We're using the data that we're getting from your devices to decide and prioritize features. But more than this is an opportunity to share some of this information back with you. So how do we make Windows an extensible platform that actually can collect information that would serve you to serve your users within the enterprise? And that's something that we're looking extensively and investing quite a bit. And then finally, this is mostly a reminder for us, again, inside Microsoft, that this brave new world of modern management is something that is going to take time. It's hard to make the shift from traditional IT to modern IT, and we need to make sure that we are taking all of our customers behind us. I just had a gentleman that left the room because he was working for the government, and he says, is this going to have a session? Is it going to discuss cloud? Because if it is, I'm out. So it's a good reminder. This transition is going to take a long time. At some point, the government is going to be also in the cloud. Maybe they are going to have their own cloud, but they are going to be in the cloud as well. So we need to make sure that we're building the system in a way that is going to allow customers to come with us. So those are the principles, and then we took those principles and we tried to apply this to the device lifecycle. So the device lifecycle is the way that we are thinking about how you, IT, interacts with Windows. From the moment that you acquire either a license or a device, to the way that you deploy this to your employees within your organizations, how you manage those devices on a day-to-day basis, keeping them up to date, and eventually providing support for your users. So we're going to discuss here not all of those things, right? You will have the slides so that you can take a closer look. We've done a current assessment of where we are, what we think is the main pain points, and then reimagine them using those principles, thinking about the cloud, what we can improve to do just better. I'm going to highlight one area in particular, which is the autopilot. And the reason I'm going to show, how many of you have seen demos of autopilot? All right, so you're going to see one more time. This time it's going to be a live demo with live code. But I actually want to share you with a little bit more insight as to what we're doing and why we're doing what we're doing. An autopilot in many ways really represents the modern IT. So I'll go over that in details here. So it's one thing that we've noticed a lot of customers are doing. In fact, how many of you are doing custom imaging to your devices? Quite a bit. We met with many, many customers. I still haven't found this IT department that would come and say, we are the best in doing imaging, right? They might be the best, but I haven't seen anyone that feels proud. I haven't felt that this is a creativity, this is a productivity thing, and that we are really, really good at this, and we're just looking for the new sets of features that you're going to introduce with imaging. People hate imaging. Imaging is a waste of money. It's actually more than just a waste of money. First of all, there is the waste of money that you are either spending in-house, doing the imaging yourself, or you're paying the OEM to actually install your image. It costs money. In fact, it costs a lot of money. If you look at the ratio between how much you're spending on Windows versus imaging, it's quite a bit. But there is a secondary cost here that I don't know how many of you thought about, right? Because of this constant need to maintain those images, what many IT departments are starting to do is saying, we are going to standardize. We're going to have 3 devices for 3 of these types of employees, and that's it. Those are the images that we are going to maintain. Those are the images that we're going to give to the OEM to install, and that's it. The net result is less selections. There are so many PCs out there that is suitable for so many different employees and so many different needs. But yet, because we're going with images, we're actually limiting our selections to a very few. Worse, IT is starting to, when they're paying for OEMs, they're going to basically do the orders in a bulk of 5,000 devices, 10,000 devices at a time. Obviously, they don't distribute them at the same time, so they're starting to put them in a warehouse, and they are starting to lose their value. There is a lot of side effects, negative side effects, to doing the imaging. So we would like to see this gone. So what is the alternative for imaging? You would say that is UBI. How many of you heard the term UBI? All right, so this is the internal Microsoft jargon for UBI is basically out-of-the-box experience. So think about the experience that users go at home. If you're buying a new device, you would see the wizard that is leading you into Windows. That is the out-of-box experience. Then we're saying, why can't employees use that one? And so IT is telling us a few facts of life of why they cannot use it. The first thing that they're telling us, when you go through UBI, our users are being asked to accept a EULA. In some countries, in some companies, accepting the EULA, the end user accepting the EULA is actually against the law. Employees are not allowed to accept the EULA on behalf of their companies because those devices belongs to the company, not to them. This is not always the case, but there are many companies where this is very, very relevant, and they would say, till you find a way of disabling that EULA, we simply cannot go through that process. So that's one thing that they're telling us. The second thing that they were telling us is, man, you guys are crazy. You have all those questions that you're asking at the beginning. This is almost like a quiz. They're answering all those questions, including the final that's the highlight of the questions. Are you an Azure tenant or something else? This feels like a test. And most people actually pass that test. But it's enough that 5% are failing on us, and IT would tell us, we don't want this. If we are going to get 5% of calls from all of our users about this initial provisioning of those devices, we're not interested. We're going to go back to imaging. So solve that problem before you're asking us to use that experience. The other thing that IT hates about that UBI experience is that users eventually end the experience with a local admin account on their devices. Many companies, this is actually very interesting. How many of you are allowing your users to have administrator's rights on their device? Okay, let me ask the opposite. How many of you do not allow? All right, we just got the statistical, this is majority. And that's a good reason by itself why many companies would actually employ images as opposed to go through the UBI experience. So that's the thing that we are designed Autopilot to solve. We really wanted to provide the best flexible solution, which is allow customers to order devices directly from a reseller's or OEM, ship those devices just in time, wherever they need it, directly to the employees, and let them do the provisioning. That is the core, that is the source of Autopilot. I would like to invite on stage Rob to come and show us a live demo of Autopilot. And I'm stressing the word live because I'm fairly nervous about that one, but he promised me that it's going to be okay.
8. Hi everyone, my name is Robbie Oak. I'm a program manager for the SCCM and customer acceleration team, and I'm here to prove to you that this works, and it's not just Jason and Ariel talking about stuff that we're going to do. This is stuff that actually works, and it's stuff that we're working on with customers today, live in, proof of concepts in their environments. So Ariel talked about the desire of organizations to move to a more modern provisioning scenario, and they often look at their MDM or their mobile device rollouts where they ship the device to the user and that device then gets enrolled. And Autopilot is part of that process. So the first part of that is to enroll the device into the Autopilot service. So soon we'll expose this in the Intune console so that you can see what devices have been registered into your Autopilot service, and you can assign the profiles to those devices and define the configuration that gets passed down as part of that enrollment. So if we go into Windows Enrollment, you can see I have 2 extra nodes here, the deployment profiles and then the devices. So if I use the Ignite demo, you can see that we can assign a directory profile. So at the moment it's AAD join only, but we will be adding AAD and AD to make a DJ++ scenario. And we can also change those configurations that Ariel was just talking about. So we can decide whether we're going to show the privacy settings or skip the end user license agreement, and crucially whether the user ends up as an administrator or as a standard user. And then if we just click out of that, we can actually see the devices that have been enrolled in or registered into the Autopilot service. And if I flick over here, so I'm going to have to ask you to use your imagination that this is a shiny shrink-wrap device, not the rather battered and bruised test device that I've been using for the past couple of weeks. But imagine this has been shipped directly to a user. They have their enrollment instructions, and they turn the device on for the first time. When that device boots, it's going to go into the standard out-of-box experience, the UBI experience that Ariel was just talking about. And as part of that, it will connect up to the Autopilot service, and they'll be asked to enter their corporate credentials. And they'll be prompted specifically for the corporate environment that it's going to be enrolled into, so it forces them down that route of auto-enrollment.
So the magic of Autopilot, for it to work, is for us to define those profiles, but more than this, it's to work with the resellers or the OEM to actually upload this. It's not exactly the serial number, but it's a unique identifier of the device into your tenant. And that's how we associate that this device belongs to you, to your customer, to your users. It could be for the company. If you want to leave this at the company level, it could also go to a specific user, should you choose to do that.
Thanks, Ariel. So the user will be presented with the out-of-box experience. If that user's been through a consumer device experience where they've gone to Best Buy and bought a device for themselves for their home use, they'll be very used to that out-of-box experience. It's the same click-throughs that they go through. Once Cortana's kind of spun herself up, both figuratively and literally, you'll be then prompted to go into some configuration. So we'll prompt you to configure the keyboard settings. It will do some auto detection. So we've got United States, this side of the pond this week, so yeah, we'll go with that. Keyboard layout is correct. And then do I want to specify a second keyboard? Am I bilingual? No, not at all. So I'm going to click skip. Ariel talked about the ability to skip the end user license agreement. In my tenant, I have not opted into that particular scenario, so the user has to accept the end user license agreement, but it is just that toggle switch in the Autopilot experience when you set up the profile. If they're plugged into a LAN cable, it will skip this stage. As long as the device has internet, it'll just move straight forward. I'm just going to have to enter a little password. Make sure I can spell Microsoft. I should be able to, yes. Let's go with yes. Perfect. So I'm now connected and I click next. Now we're talking up to the Autopilot service, and it's going to bring down that configuration profile that says, hey, this is a corporate device. So it skips certain things. So you saw that I'd selected to skip the privacy settings. We skipped that. We also skip, quite crucially, that page where the user gets presented with is this a corporate device or a personal device? Some customers are concerned that users would just choose personal device because they think, hey, free surface. But we'll actually go and force them down that route of corporate enrollment. And you'll see in a second that we actually say, please enter your corporate credentials. It's branded with your corporate details. There you go. Welcome to intunedom.com. Please enter your password, or email and password. I'm not Lucy this week, Jason, I'm Ella. Enter my password, or Ella's password. And it's at this point that we then start that enrollment. So Azure Active Directory join, leveraging Azure Active Directory premium feature of auto MDM enrollment, we're going to enroll that device into Intune, and then Intune can start to lay down some configuration. And it's at this point you kind of have a fork in the road. There's two options. You could go down the full modern management route and leverage Intune and all of the capabilities there. Or if you have SCCM today, we'll be able to leverage and push out SCCM over the internet, leveraging Cloud Management Gateway. And a shameless plug, the session immediately after this, 2 floors upstairs, myself and Heidi will be talking about deeper dive of Windows 10 provisioning and management and Office 365. So if you want to learn more about that, resulting in an SCCM managed device as a result of autopilot, nip upstairs after this session and we'll dig into those details a little bit more. So the device is just finishing its out-of-box experience now. There's a final few stages that it will go through before I disappear. So we're pushing out some certificates from Intune via Endes, and I'm also going to be prompted for a Windows Hello for Business pin, which we'll configure, and then I'll leave you guys to continue talking. We'll also in RS3 have the ability to present a screen to the user that tells them that additional configuration has been applied, and we'll show you a slide of that yet. It's not baked into this demo. I'm going to skip using my face, but I am going to...
Good choice.
Thanks. So I've now been prompted for the Hello for Business pin. So set up a pin. And this Hello for Business pin will come into play later on when we see how we can leverage that pin to make the device even more productive and even more seamless for the user once that device is provisioned. Excuse me a second. Sorry, that was really urgent. So what's happened now is I've been presented with multi-factor authentication. The user's already been set up for MFA. They've previously used cloud services. So when they enter their credentials, it goes, hey, you're configured for MFA. I'm going to go and check who you are. So we're inherently secure in that provisioning of the device. There's no passing of credentials. There's no contractor or admin that needs to know that user's credentials. The user does all the provisioning themselves, and then they're prompted for a PIN, and then I'll disappear. So I'm all set, and that's going to take me straight down to the desktop. It's at this point that we would show you this screen. So if there's additional configuration that we need to lay down onto the box, RS3 will be able to present that screen so that the user knows that configuration is happening to their device, so that when they get left with just a desktop and no applications, they know that the configuration is coming down. And I'll come back later on, and hopefully this device will be fully provisioned, and we can go through some of the additional steps.
Thanks, Rob.
Thank you, Rob. So, autopilot, you've seen the demo. You look at this and saying, what's the big deal? It looks exactly what I'm doing at home. It looks like the commercial scenario, the consumer scenario. And this is exactly the point. Just provide an out-of-the-box experience that every user can go through. So if it's good for home, it should be good for business, and actually provisioning the device. The thing that I really think that is interesting and I like about this demo, that is, if you really play this slowly, just from the phases that we went through, you would see some interesting aspects. First of all, we've done this provisioning for this Contoso company. I think it was Contoso? What was the name of the company?
Yeah.
Contoso, of course. We've done this from a public place. We've done this from the conference room. That speaks to the fact that employees can do it from anywhere. We have a lot of customers that have their consultants, their employees that are working in other remote locations, and they don't want to ship the devices from the OEM resellers to the corporate to reimage, configure them only to ship this. If something goes wrong, and employees can simply go to Best Buy, get those devices, and actually provision this, or just ship them directly. So that's one aspect that you've seen. You've seen here the aspect of the single user sign-on, because you'll see this later on. Those users are now on AAD, so they sign up with their credentials. The other thing that Rob did not show, Those users are not admins on those devices. They ended up with a local, with non-admin account. And the other thing that is interesting here is the machine was already upgraded to be an enterprise edition, assuming that they have the license. So all of this happens in one flow. This is not just a pro edition. This is now based on your AAD. All the activations of the licensing is all done through the cloud. So that's something to keep in mind. Few more things here to think about the device lifecycle. Every one of those swim lanes we actually account for as part of being modern IT. Again, how you buy, how you provision the devices, and so on. One thing that is important for you to keep in mind, while this is showing a very linear progression, for you in your enterprise, you can actually implement different pieces of this modern IT vision at different point of times. You can actually focus on getting those devices, auto deployment, that would be one big step. Maybe don't do autopilot, but do Intune management. That would be the next thing. Or maybe just maintaining your devices so that they would be up to date using Windows Update for Business. Okay? You can do all those different sequencing, and that would still be considered to be part of the modern IT. Speaking of which, I want to cover a little bit more about updates, because I think that this is, from everything that we have here, is one of the things that is really, really important for us to think about. Updates, traditionally, were extremely, extremely hard. You as an IT took those upgrade processes as a project that you had to plan years ahead of time. You've done a lot of testing every possible apps to ensure that it's compatible with the newer version of Windows. Many companies actually skipped a release of Windows or just introduced Windows when they are refreshing their devices. That might have been okay in the past when Windows was released in those frequencies of 3 to 5 years. Now that we are releasing twice a year, something needs to change. Right? We know that, and I think that hopefully you know that. You would know very quickly that you cannot apply the same procedures, the same processes, and the tooling that you used to do in the past on doing this twice a year. You're just going to break down. Maybe it would work for you first time, second time. At some point, you need to realize that something needs to change. We understand that, and we're trying to build all the tools and the infrastructure to help you make the transition. Move away from testing Windows to piloting Windows. What do we mean by that? We have this concept of rings. How many of you heard about the rings? Yeah, pretty good, not too bad. The concept of rings suggests that you should actually be taking builds of Windows and start testing them at the early phases. Basically, be part of the Insider program. We now have an Insider program that is specifically for commercial customers that are based on AAD. And all the information is being saved privately. You can actually submit bugs through the feedback tools, and it's left between you and Microsoft. No other customers would be able to see those. We recommend that you'll have a small group of people that would be working on those rings. That would be folks from your IT department, some developers, and I know typically when I'm asking how do you guys do your beta programs within the organization, there's always volunteers that are very excited about taking new builds of Windows. So start small. That is ring one. As things are progressing and we're getting close to actually announcing and releasing a release, like we're about to announce the fall updates, this is where you will need to expand to a larger group of users. We would try to help you in the future. This is something that we're working on to help you pick more intelligent rings. Rings that are small maybe in size, but would cover the most configuration that you have, based on telemetry that we have, of course. We would figure out the types of devices that you have, the application that you're running, and install on those, and we would try to recommend you the best sets of users that are suitable for the first ring. That would be the first large group of users that would be piloting the new version of Windows. And if everything goes well, and when we announce the public availability for commercial customers, this is where you would expand this. But the concept of rings, the way that it works, it's kind of like a self-driving car. You let it flow, you let it run, and if everything is okay, just let it pass through to the next ring and the next ring till everyone gets the devices. You as an IT would have the option to simply press the red button to stop when you feel that something goes wrong. It's a completely different way of working with Windows, And again, I equate this to the way that self-driving cars would be, right? It's going to take a long time till everyone would feel comfortable that the car can actually drive me. I think that we're going to see that whenever we have those cars really on the road, there would still be a steering wheel because no one would trust those cars for a very long time. So we're not expecting you to trust us for a very long time, but we are going to provide you the tools and the telemetry and the insights that would allow you to gain that confidence that things are actually working. Spoke with many, many customers that are actually doing all those testing manually of all those 5,000 applications, and you always ask them at the end, so what did you find? How many of your applications? Most of them actually work. And it's part of this is because of those small increments that we're making with Windows. By releasing every 6 months, it's actually allowing us to, well, it's giving us less opportunity to break your applications. And it's being seen in many cases. I'm not saying that there are no regressions, but it's not as bad as it used to be, like from moving to from XP to Windows 7 and so on. So that's something to keep in mind. Brad yesterday presented this slide. I like this slide. It speaks a lot about the differences between traditional IT to modern IT and the challenges that relates to switching from one end to the other one. But this is a nice looking slide that I would say marketing put together. It's very simplistic. It ignores one thing, the reality of the amount of investments that you have all put in your on-prem infrastructure. All this slide can be translated, if you look at this from a product perspective, to these sets of investments. Wide, huge deployments of SCCM, WSOS, all applications connected on corporate network, and on and on. This is a long legacy, a lot of expertise that you all collected for many, many years. And while we are building the parallel track in the cloud, this transition from the traditional one to modern IT is going to be long and fairly challenging. I would like to actually bring on stage Joseph Parady, that would actually provide a customer perspective on those challenges.
Thank you, Ariel. So my name is Joseph Parady, and I am much like all of you. I run an IT department within Avanade, serving 10,000 users around the globe. We are a very close partner of Microsoft, so we've been involved in this Windows 10 journey since the start. And we've understood the value of modern management. We look at modern management and we see a lot of things that we want. We see a lot of things that will provide benefit. But like all of you, I've got legacy estate there. I've got machines, I've got SCCM, I've got all these other things. And so we look at modern management, we have a challenge. And that challenge is, how do I get from where I am right now to where I want to be? And we looked at those challenges, and we've been talking with Microsoft, and we put a lot of those challenges into these two big buckets, right? And I'll talk a little bit about each one. So the first bucket are challenges that go along with having Active Directory as the main model for your machines. So if you're anything like us, you're looking at the cloud, you've embraced the cloud to a certain extent, and we're very focused on the cloud, SaaS applications, Azure Active Directory is the way to go. But the reality is, even I've still got some applications that are running on-prem in my data center, that are from a vendor who's never going to update anything other than NTLM and Kerberos, who expects everybody to be running Windows 7 because this 10 thing is too new for them. But my finance guys need this to close the books. So I can't tell my CFO, dude, I'm turning it off, right? So I have to keep that around for a while. But even more importantly is I've got 15 plus years of group policy in my Active Directory. And I'm going to be the first to admit not all of it is good group policy, but it's there. And I've got OUs, and I've got hierarchies of OUs, and I've got inheritance, and I've got group policies that apply to only a certain AD group or have a WMI filter. There's a lot of complexity, but it's important. It allows us to do what we need to do as a business. And that's not going away. Modern management doesn't remove the complexity of my business. My business is still there. The other big bucket of challenges is around SCCM. We've been using SCCM since 2.0, have the scars to prove it, right? But SCCM does a lot of things that we really need, right? Classical software distribution, patch management. But we've also built a bunch of things on top of SCCM. We've got our compliance process that reads the backend database and gives me a report of who hasn't checked in over a while, right? We have CIs and CBs that we've built that help our business to find certain things that they're interested in or manage our compliance. And those aren't going away. And in some cases, the reports that we produce from SCCM are necessary for us to meet some of our regulatory compliance. And I can't stop doing that for my business either. So we've got a real challenge. How do we get from here where I am today over to modern management? And when we looked at that and we talked with the Microsoft Windows product group, we said, guys, this isn't like a little step that I have to make. This looks like a canyon to me. I'm nervous. I'm uncomfortable. I don't think I can run fast enough to make that jump successfully. And so what we said is we need to have a way to bridge that gap. And what we thought about was, we've done this before. We went from on-prem Exchange to Office 365 Exchange. We did it for SharePoint, and most recently we did it for Skype for Business. So what can we think about in terms of how did they design what they did to help us be successful? And how can the Windows group look at that and say, hey, can we do something similar? So one of the things that all of the Office 365 cloud services have done is they've provided this bridge. Now for Skype for Business and Exchange, they call this a hybrid mode, right? It's where you have the ability to have the things that you know, administrative interfaces that you know, mailboxes, all those other sorts of things, on-prem and in the cloud. It allows you to move over time those workloads. It allows you as the customer to decide, based on your business needs, which group goes first, which group goes second, which might have to wait, who has special needs that you need to account for. And so it allows you to make that transition across that canyon in a controlled way that allows you to meet your business. So we talked to the Windows product group and we said, guys, I think this is something that would be valuable for you as well, to help all the IT professionals to make that journey to modern management. And I was very pleased to see yesterday, for the first time publicly, that they announced what is known as co-management. And I'm going to turn it over to Jason to talk more to you about how co-management has been implemented with Windows 10. Thanks.
Thanks, Joseph. Yeah, so we finally listened. We'd been asked for a bridge for a while. I think it was in the epiphany for me happened in Minneapolis in January, and it was about 1 degree. So we were racing from customer to not freeze to death getting between these. And a consistent theme kept coming up, this ask for a bridge. And specifically, and one customer even asked specifically for, why don't you guys let SCCM and Intune run on the same PC? I'm like, oh, that's silly. We decided in our infinite wisdom 2 years ago to never let that happen. I think of all the things that could go wrong. And then, on yet another cold car ride to yet another cold office, I started thinking about that. And I was like, maybe that's not the craziest thing in the world. Let's think about why why there might be value there. And so we really, let me click there. What we really stepped away from is this preconceived notion that, never the two of traditional and modern management of SCCM and Intune or Active Directory and Azure Active Directory, they should not join together. You should go from one to the other. But then, getting that feedback and then really parsing down what they were actually asking for, what they were trying to achieve, not just the implementation detail of SCCM and Intune together, it was more about what's the intent. And when you step back and really look at the intent by synthesizing a lot of the data points that a lot of customers were saying, it became super obvious that, we forgot to build a bridge. We built a beautiful tower of modern management. Everyone's still over in the old office tower, and there's no sky bridge between the two. There's an escape velocity problem. You know, with a multi-stage rocket, you need a way to get 25,000 miles per hour to get out, to break the gravitational pull, to net that out to zero. We're not providing that escape. We were not providing that path, and that's really that's what the past 8-9 months of an engineering effort have been done on our part across Windows, our side on the SCCM and Intune sides, and that's all accruing to a bridge solution that's all going to come together in this calendar year, so that you no longer are in a model where where we're asking you to make a huge leap, knowing that you have a huge ecosystem of services and solutions that you have to provide. And I don't want to spend too much time on this. The main thing I want to point out here is that we have this beautiful workflow, starting with the autopilot pieces that we talked about earlier that Rob demoed. The challenge of the autopilot piece to date is that it takes you through this route and ends you up in this upper left corner of simplified cloud management. You've just leaped over all of those metaphors of traditional management and ended up in a pure cloud state. So yes, you perhaps got out of the imaging overhead and you're able to use autopilot to use that, you know, signature image model direct to the user. But to date, we had not had a way where that autopilot experience or the out-of-box experience could put you in a bridge state. You ended up in a pure cloud state. So with the changes we're making the rest of this calendar year, you can use that autopilot experience, and like Rob mentioned, he'll demo this in more detail after this session upstairs. But you can use that autopilot as a bootstrapping engine to get the client or get the PC from the factory to the user. But then what you do, the workflow there, is that we're going to add the ability to also domain join the PC, so you end up combined domain join and Azure Active Directory join, so you get the benefit of modern and traditional auth. We're going to support that from an off-network connection using offline domain join blobs delivered by Intune, and then a connection back to domain controller to provide that domain join piece. And Intune is actually going to be the service that drops the SCCM agent down. And one of the magical things behind that is with our new cloud management gateway piece in Config Manager, you have an internet exposed perimeter to Config Manager off of a single role server, and you don't have to have certificate authority or PKI implementations to take advantage of it, because we're going to use that AAD integration that we're doing for the authentication piece. So your client, so here's the basic workflow. You could ship a PC to your user. They go through, you've registered in autopilot. They open the box. They're not on corporate network. But they could end up getting SCCM policies, apps, etc., directly through that cloud management gateway. And at the same time, we'll have established a wire to Intune. So you basically have persisted a connection to both. So now you can take advantage of all of these pieces, the proactive insights, always up to date, the self-service deployment, and you've established a wire to simplified management and security. But you haven't cut the tether to traditional management and security at the same time. So you end up in a state where you can then operate with both. And so backing up, you guys are probably painfully aware of the challenges of moving to modern management, but I'll cover this briefly. This is all part of the strategy paper we put together after we had that very cold epiphany and that cold Minneapolis winter. Feature gaps, that's a common one, and the common ones you hear is Win32 app support or group policy versus MDM policy. That's one type of issue. Those are the ones we can most easily engineer our way out of. We can take feedback, we can provide tools, we can evolve the Windows platform and the Intune service, and we can chip away at those. And we've made a lot of progress in the fall creators update and the corresponding Intune service updates to really chip away at some of those just fundamental gaps. The next three, though, are really not anything, they're not anything we can solve with technology, or engineering, I should say. The monolithic one-day problem is really an extension of that experience I had on that super cold day, or days, where I would commonly go in and I'd see this aspirational CIO-built slide that had traditional management going down on, down the y-axis and modern going up. The x-axis, which was supposed to represent time, didn't have a single date on it. There was no real, when is this going to happen? It was, this thing's going to happen, isn't it neat? How are we going to do it? Not sure, but it looks cool for the CIO. We've committed to modernizing. When are we doing it? I don't know. So we call that the one-day problem. So the one-day problem is one day we're going to be modern, and then the next day, and then the next day, and the next month, the next year, and you're still not modern. And plugging data back into that modern statement, We also saw our SCCM telemetry. We saw 94 million managed, nearly 100 million managed PCs in our current branch version of Config Manager. 24 million of those are Windows 10, and all 24 million are domain joined SCCM agent managed, despite all of the innovation and investment we put into modernizing Windows. And that kind of leads to the other two pieces. A lot of solutions, and Joseph talked a little bit about this, a lot of partners have invested in these on-prem solutions with connections to Active Directory or interoperating with Config Manager through our rich API that's been around for 20 years. And they've built up ecosystems of services, whether it's application lifecycle, asset management, approval workflows, licensing management. All these systems have all wired up together and really even further entrenched the customer in this model of persisting traditional, and let's just manage Windows 10 like we did Windows 7. And that made us sad because we wanted Windows 10 to be different than Windows 7, yet they all start life in the same way that Windows 7 started life, and they're all plugged into these 15 different IT systems that are plugged into Config Manager that spew out auditing reports and process workflows and et cetera. And then the last piece really is Windows 7. Windows 7 being the reality in most enterprises still today. That's how you end up managing Windows 10, just like Windows 7, because you started mostly Windows 7 and you just repeat the processes that you used in Windows 7. So again, that's, and it's just, this honeycomb just paints more of the sad tale of the entrenched ecosystem of Windows manageability, from identity authentication, security policies, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, it's a mesh, right? And we didn't build a good plan to get out of that mesh. And so so we kind of stepped back and we replayed the paths to modern management. How could a customer get there? The first one's cloud first. New organization, spin off from a parent organization, they get a new lease on IT life, or they don't have the old baggage, just go cloud. Don't even say the word domain controller or SCCM. Just go all cloud and be happy with that. Then there's the big switch transition that you've got to modernize all those honeycomb pieces at one time, and here's a little insight. That never happens. That never happens in parallel because they're all owned by different parts of the IT organization. So you end up with this ridiculous serialization of efforts where, okay, the identity team is going to go analyze group policy relative to what's available in MDM. That's their job. And then the application team is going to work with the identity team to see which applications use which authentication types. And that they're going to get to that as soon as they get done deploying that major LOB app update that they need to run the business. So you end up in this cycle of this stuff just never gets done because you're serializing all of it. And that's what makes the big switch transition, and big switch is just going all, like Joseph mentioned, trying to go fell swoop on-prem to cloud. Then there's group by group. I think we really bet a lot on this in our early thinking in the Intune and Windows side, is that we would see some parts of the organization could just go modern. The users that never are on the corporate network, or the users that, the users like the canonical one we always threw out there was the field sales user. They just have the one app and, they don't need a lot of policies, they don't touch HBI data, and just let them, rerun from the cloud. The problem is, in this cute little boat picture here, that guy gets to sail over to beautiful modern island, but everybody else is parked over there on the mainland looking over, and they can't get there. And IT can't get them there because clearly they only have a kayak. They did not get a bigger boat. And so that leads us to the last piece, which is the iterative path. And that's really the foundational principle of our co-management piece. And I think Joseph nailed it. Other products, other services we've released at Microsoft, we have provided bridging. Think of Azure Active Directory and Active Directory. Without federation, I don't think our Azure Active Directory uptake would be as high as it is, because very few organizations are going to rebuild their identity servers full stop in a cloud-only service. With that federated connective tissue of, say, ADFS or Azure Connect, you basically start bridging those two, and you can modernize your identity structure over time, but you're not faced with some big switch decision, which is the one or first or second columns or rows on this slide. So it's really about a practical way to migrate all over time. Modern is not all or nothing, and I think most importantly, you minimize risk. The other benefit, before I jump over here, is it really puts that transition in the hands of folks like you in the room who know deeply and understand the challenges of PC management and has become the drivers for this transition based on your years of knowledge that have been built up around the Windows ecosystem. And it's not as simple as just enrolling, switching switching Windows from SCCM and AD to Intune and AAD. There are some pieces that have to go along there to finish that whole process, and it's really meant to minimize risk. The other understanding we got, it took us a little while to figure this out, but the variability of organizations. Not every organization is going to move the same way. Joseph and Avanade, they may have some apps that they got to figure out how they're going to do modern authentication with. That may be the piece they have to solve first. They may move everything to Intune, but persist SCCM and domain join for some Win32 apps, some tail Win32 apps, with the intent eventually those are modernized and you stop doing that. But the main thing here is that the main point is that we understand there's going to be variability, and the workloads you can move to Intune are going to vary by the organization based on your application, your application portfolio, the policies you use, how you do software updates, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This is just a high-level overview of the kind of the base architecture of what I'm talking about. The main thing to point out is that bottom box that's covering up the bridge. That's just indicating that your Win10 client is enrolled into Intune and managed by SCCM and could optionally be also domain joined and Azure Active Directory registered. I've lost my train of thought. The ways to get into that state are that autopilot experience that I already walked through. That's one way to do it out of the box on new hardware. The other way to do it is your existing Win10 population that's probably came to life through an imaging construct and is SCCM managed and AD or domain joined, will provide the ability in our 17.10 update of SCCM to effectively build a collection, hit a button, and auto-register and Intune enroll that set of clients that's already existing in your environment. That sets them up with their cloud tether so you can start moving workloads for that set of clients as well. And that's basically, this slide basically talks about that, so I'll go right past this one. And I do want to talk a little bit about our conceptual model here using an SCCM console snippet. We call this conceptually, and I think we're actually going to ship with this name, Management Insights. Our Management Insights interface is really your one-stop shop for us to provide you analytics on your existing SCCM data. This does not imply that you need to wire up to cloud telemetry. We're just going to look at what you have. An example of what I mean by that is one of the first things you need to rationalize before you move from traditional to cloud are grouping and targeting constructs. If you're familiar with SCCM collections, you can customize those things down into oblivion. I mean, you can put queries around query logic, AD discovery information. You can build whatever kind of custom view you want of your entire organization down to the serial number, office location, phone number of the user level of detail. If you have thousands of those, then we will do analytics on those and tell you that do your collection and you do your grouping and targeting metaphors with collections map up to what AAD dynamic groups provide, because that is the grouping and targeting model for cloud. So if you don't even know how to group and target, you probably need to get some rationalization of how you're doing grouping and targeting today and map that up to what the grouping and targeting of the future will be, because Azure Active Directory groups is the grouping metaphor for every Microsoft service. We don't have 20 different ways to do grouping across Microsoft products now. But you do need to rationalize your grouping and targeting foundations of today, particularly in like SCCM collections, with what they would look like in AAD dynamic groups. Other pieces we'll add here are, it's kind of, and this is not final UI, it's just conceptual, but we'll basically give you the ability to, by group, move a certain workload all the way to Intune and let Intune take over that workload. What I mean by that is you might pick a pilot group, which is a standard collection. You might choose that for that particular group, compliance policies are now an Intune thing. What that means is that now Intune is doing the compliance assessment, AAD is doing the conditional access gating based on whether or not you're compliant based on the Intune assessment, and that's going to determine your access to resources like Exchange Online or Office 365 generally. And so and since conditional access and compliance is really more of a cloud metaphor anyway, it makes sense to just move that and turn that over to Intune and stop trying to do that out of an agent-based solution. You don't have to deal with client health, blocking the user when the client health is bad and suddenly the user can't get mail because they have a client problem. There's no client health issue if Intune is owning that workload. Another one that I think that I would expect to see would be the next one to get some traction would be moving management of updates, feature and quality, over to the Intune side for policy, the Windows Update for Business, or more specific, or more generally, the Windows Update service, with the policies for Windows Update for Business handled by Intune. The reason I think that's an important one for customers to really dig into is that there are a lot of moving parts in the software update sequence of Windows today, particularly with, I'm talking with traditional tools like SCCM and WSUS, particularly when we make changes like the cumulative update model, where the payload size gets large, or the other publishing changes we make, like having to add express support in SCCM to minimize the impact of a large update size. The problem is you get on this treadmill of all the things you've got to stay current with just to do fundamental stuff like patch Windows. So you've got to make sure SCCM's on the latest current branch version. You've got to hotfix WSUS or take the new version of WSUS that comes with Server 2016. And you got to be on the right platform of Windows so that it can understand the express model using SCCM. So all these things are moving around. But if you move that thinking and concept to cloud-based Windows updates, the only moving part are the Windows Update agent and the Windows Update service, which are up to date with the latest way to deliver updates efficiently to the client. So you're out of the treadmill model. So and then you're using the cloud analytics, the Windows Analytics Update Compliance as your reporting interface for your compliance assessment. I was going to do just a quick plug for Windows Update or Windows Analytics Update Compliance. It's another great thing to wire into, even if you don't make any co-management changes, just to get some additional insight into what your compliance state is, and compare that to what you're seeing with your on-prem tools. And are those equal, or are they vastly different? And it's a good comparison. Almost use analytics as an oversight committee to what you're seeing internally with your SCCM environment. Will be a good starting point without moving any workload to be managed by Intune at this point. Okay, so last slide, and then we're gonna get Rob back in here to wrap up the demo. And so this is just a slightly different view on the red background multi-dot slide that Ariel went through. What we tried to do here, it's not to scale, it's a thumb in the air guide, but really what we're trying to display here is the order of magnitude of complexity of each of the workloads involved in making a transition to modern management. This is as much for us to put on our walls and not forget as it is customer guidance, because we have to provide ways for each of these to be transitioned. For example, if working from top to bottom, it's, federate AAD. That's a fundamental, right? Even consumption of Microsoft services generally it's going to require some federation. Move from MSI-based Office to Office ProPlus. That would be another step to stay current with Office. Obviously, you have to get to Windows 10. I touched a little bit on considering moving from WSUS to Windows Update for Business, getting off of imaging to signature imaging, group policy to MDM policy, curb to modern auth rationalization, Win32 to modern apps, or desktop bridging those applications, and finally the content delivery challenges, right? The reliance on peer caching rather than file servers or distribution points at branch locations and things like that. But again, if you in our old thinking, you would have to line all these up and try to rationalize each of these, and they would stretch all the way over probably to the Hyatt, and you would never get through all the workloads. Co-management provides you a way to start chipping away at these and getting out of doing these things over time, but you don't have to do that in one large cutover or one big switch transition. And with that, I think I'll bring Rob back out to wrap up the demo, and we'll finish about right on time. So. Green.
Am I on now? Awesome. So Jason and I have been visiting a whole host of customers over the past couple of months, and I normally introduce myself as the guy that needs to tell him to shut up when it's time to shut up, and well, I've failed on that job today.
We're a really tight team. The other thing we do is we cook all this crazy stuff up and then go tell Rob to help customers implement it. So
if I jump onto the box that we provisioned earlier, as Ariel mentioned, through Autopilot, we enforce that the device or the user is a standard user. We provide that option. So quick, simple way of just showing that. Launch out computer management. And we'll show that that's not there. So there's no admin rights for this user.
we haven't used Zoom it at all.
We haven't. Shall I use
have it?
Yeah.
Nothing's complete without Zoom
There we
it.
go. There's
Great,
Zoom it.
awesome.
So one of the crucial requirements for a lot of customers is that they enforce that, or enforce the lack of local admin rights for their users. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to jump over to this box. And what you guys didn't realize earlier, when I first started running through those demos, my first device is actually a device that went through that modern provisioning scenario. So in true children's TV style, here's one I made earlier, and we can show you that this device is not only modern provisioned, but is a completely productive device. So through SCCM, we've pushed down Office and any other line of business applications that this particular user needs. We also have the ability through SCCM and the self-service to be able to go in and choose the applications that the user needs. Also being able to push down VPN profiles so that the user can connect back to any on-prem services that they may have. And thanks to that Windows Hello for Business pin that I set up earlier, that allows me to do seamless auth against internal applications and line of business apps, even though I'm not domain joined. So a nice simple one to show that is I can open up a server share. All being well. So that's seamlessly connected to a server share internally in my corporate network. And what's really cool about that is that's actually going cross-forest. So there's 2 trusted forests in my environment. I'm logged on as Intune DOM. That's gone and connected to a share that's sat in SCCM DOM. And it's seamlessly connected using the credentials specified in Active Directory. And I can also then go into Software Center, and I can then start to choose those line of business apps that I might need to self-provision. Slightly slow because of the VPN. But here you go, you can see that same experience that user used to today, and I can go in and I can select the SCCM console, and that's then going to install over the Cloud Management Gateway using the cloud distribution point, purely provisioned across the internet to that device wherever it is in the world.
So I think the important piece there is that these are obviously very much traditional Win32 management constructs, but they provide the ability to reach, it extends the reach so you can still reach the client so they can still get their Win32 apps, and it gives you time to start then redeveloping the applications to modernize them and eventually transition the app workload to Intune as well. But we know day 0 you're not going to be ready to go all modern applications, so it gives you some time to still deliver applications in a traditional way, but also reach the clients in a different way and not require they be on corporate network to get there, because as Rob pointed out, this is all from Cloud Management Gateway and Cloud Distribution Points. Again, traditional SCCM management metaphors, but it's a bridging strategy to where you can continue business that way and then modernize on the back end of that and eventually stop doing it that way, but you don't have to make that decision day 0 to start moving to modern management. You can do that iteratively over time.
And then finally, really the last thing to show, for those of you that want to see more about how that end-to-end provisioning resulting in that SCCM managed state is, I'll see you guys in half an hour and we'll go into some of the specifics of how we make that work within SCCM and Intune working together. But the final bit is the co-management story within Intune. So if we go into the devices in Intune, we'll actually show whether the device or where the device is managed. So we can see whether it's MDM and Config Manager. So we'll actually show that in the Intune console so that when you're looking in those consoles, if you are in that co-managed state, you know which devices are maybe full modern versus a co-managed state. We're done.
Great. I think that's it. Thanks, Rob.
Thanks.
Everybody else still back there? Just want to come out and I would bow or something. I don't know. Thank you, guys.
So I think we have a couple minutes for questions.
Yeah, we do. We have exactly a couple minutes, 3 minutes. If there are any questions, you want to come up
Microphones
come
around
to the
the
mic,
room. Yeah.
or find us at booth duty.
Question, when will all this be available to us?
Through the end of this calendar year. It's based on the Fall Creators Update, 1710 of Config Manager, and some updates we're doing on the Intune service side, also in the October-November timeframe.
Second question, a lot of us run the preview version. We're admins on our PCs, and we use RSAT to manage our networks. When are you going to fix it so we don't have to reinstall RSAT every time you push down a new update for Windows?
I don't know. We'd have to dig deeper than that in a Q&A in a room full of 1,000 people. But
I like Avanade, are looking to try to get to modern management. So the gap that we see is something that, we've invested products to doing other things to manage. So my question, kind of from an external perspective, is there something that you've seen that could be viewed as a quick win, that maybe companies who are thinking of doing the same thing, bridging that gap, that we could say, oh, you know what, this is a quick win, this is something that we could move to quickly as we test and try other products, or try WolfBee or even Intune as that modern management solution?
I'll tell you what we're looking at first is Windows Update Management, right? We believe that MDM managed for updates and talking directly to the cloud is our first opportunity. It's very well defined, really scaled by Windows Update already. So we think that that's something. The majority of our PCs are outside of our corporate network because we're a consulting company. So for us, we think get the MDM agent down, right? We're 97% Windows 10 already. I know, crazy, I get it, but that's what we do for a living. But I think updates, right? I think that's the first thing we're gonna do is get updates, get them from the cloud, get them managed that way. And then as Jason had mentioned, telemetry, right? What can the MDM telemetry give us about our fleet that's on the internet that can help us to manage? So that's where I would start.
yeah. And we are, unfortunately,
Getting kicked
out of time, getting kicked out. We will, we'll have booth presence, and Rob will go the next Click Stop Deeper in the next session. So please stop by that and find us around. We can talk over here as well, off to the side, but we need to cede our space.
I'm heading upstairs right now to do the next session.
Thanks.
So.
We'll be out in a couple minutes. You guys pick up our bags.